Last time we were talking about figures of speech that come up in literary texts written in any language. But in the arsenal of figurative speech, there are some techniques that haven't come into common use. They remained a feature of a specific people or age, and if we aren't initiated into the mystery of why they said things in a certain manner, we may not understand anything in their speech at all. Moreover, we may understand what they said in a meaning quite different from what was purported. Effectively, if a text contains some devices that we aren't accustomed to or aware of, it turns for us into literature from another planet. I will now remind you about how the English built their poetry. From your childhood on, those of you who were raised in English-speaking countries have been used to nursery rhymes and then more serious poetry based on consonant ends of lines. I mean ends of lines that sound alike. If you can feel the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Here you are, minute in it, run, son. Besides, there is the rhythm, or if we use the proper term, the metrical foot, a certain pattern of stressed syllables in each line. That is the basis of our modern English poetry. And when we don't find these techniques in a text, we don't think of it as poetic. Poetry is some specially structured text. All the words there are adjusted to have similar ends and they fit a pattern of stresses. That's why we don't expect there any extraordinary precision. We can even say the author put it so for the sake of the rhyme. We even expect lesser precision of expressing things in poetry. And what we do expect is a certain structure and colorfulness. But it's us who have such techniques. Others don't have to follow that manner. For instance, in Spanish poetry, they don't rhyme every line, only every second one, and they only rely on vowels. As for the consonants, they don't matter at all. Here's, for example, a randomly taken stance by Federico Garcia Lorca. I'm not going to read it out for you due to the lack of knowledge of Spanish, but if you write it all just in one line and read it as a simple text, it won't be obvious to us that it's poetic. Actually, poets can get away with no rhymes at all, like ancient Greeks and Romans did. The poet there relied on the pattern of stresses and number of syllables in the lines. But in addition to that, the classical Greek and Roman poetry presupposed a certain pattern of short and long syllables, which our poetic tradition doesn't. However, Old English poetry, as well as the poetry of the Vikings, had its own features. It also had similarities in the words of neighboring lines, or to be more precise, half verses. But the first sound in the main word in the second half of the verse was adjusted on purpose to the way the main word in the first half of the verse started. This device is called alliteration. If we read that with our today's eyes, we don't see it as poetry either. We don't know where to look for that harmony. It should be shown to us by experts. Let me give you an example. It's an old English poem by somebody called Whitsitt. He describes the life of a traveling minstrel. I chose it because a modern English translation preserves much of the original alliteration, so it's clear in meaning and true to the original style. The passage reads, So I fared through many a foreign realm, this wide earth over, as weal or ill came to my ken. Of my kin bereft, far from my folk, I followed onward. Wherefore I can sing and say my tales, to men in the meat hall make my lay, how high-born heroes heaped me with gifts. The alliterations in each line are highlighted here in bold. Moreover, in order to do such alliteration and make the beginnings of lines fit some key sounds, they also had special devices. They had a whole archive of metaphors, circumlocutions that could be employed to say what you feel like, starting a line with the necessary sound. Such a thing is called kenning. That's a well-known off-the-shelf metaphor that encodes a simplest thing. Try to guess what a wave swine is. Okay, let's make it easier. A swine used to mean a boar, B-O-A-R. What's a wave boar? A wave boar is a ship. Now, why was it called that? Because a boar runs through the forest and a ship runs through the waves. Therefore, a ship is a wave boar. Now, what's a beowulf? What kind of creature is that? Actually, that's the name of the main character of the Old English epic, known to us as Beowulf. It's a bear. Why is a beowulf a bear? How can we disclose that logically? A wolf attacks, and a bear attacks bees to steal their honey. So a bear is a beowulf. What's the son of houses? It is fire. The sun gives light to the world like fire gives a light to a house. So fire is the son of houses. But even that isn't the final. The kennings I have just given as examples can also be compound. 3 words, not 2. Such as the fir tree of the sword storm. What's that? Let's decode. Sword storm is when swords are raging. It's a battle. A fir tree was a ready-made metaphor for a man. Therefore, the fir tree of the battle or the fir tree of the sword storm is a man taking part in a battle. That is a warrior. But even that isn't the end. You can come across this. The linden tree of the land of the hiding fishes of the heather. That's a real phrase from Scandinavian poetry. A linden tree of the land of the hiding fishes of the heather. Who's that? What baloney! That's just a set of random, disconnected words, isn't it? Well, you just need to know the code. When wandering skalds, storytellers, recited it all, everyone understood them perfectly because the audience was aware of how those metaphors were to be deciphered. Let's reveal the mystery of the linden tree of the land of the hiding fishes of the heather. The hiding fishes of the heather are snakes. Snakes are swift like fishes, but they hide in thickets of heather, not seaweed. That's why they are hiding fishes of the heather. The land of the hiding fishes of the heather is gold, because it was a folk belief that gold is guarded by snakes. Now the linden tree of the land of the hiding fishes of the heather, that is the linden tree of gold, is a lady adorned with gold, because a linden tree was a standard image for a lady, like a fir tree is a standard image for a man. They must have admired the way sculptors were stringing such multi-storied cannons. But basically, they found it all clear. However, we don't, since we aren't aware of the code to understand those metaphors. Why make it so complicated? Why? They enjoyed that. That was their culture. That's how alien another culture can be. When such poetic vagaries come up fairly often, they can give rise to a symbol. Now, as that symbol will be based on a culture quite alien to us, we may not see it as a symbol at all. In the Egyptian museum, you will see a statue of King Tut. It is black. Why? He wasn't black. But no one was going to say he was black. The black color is there for quite a different reason. It's a symbol of abundance. The pharaoh was expected to bring abundance, so he was pictured in the color of abundance. But why is black the color of abundance? Because abundance comes from fertility of the soil, and the silty soil of the Nile Valley is black. Different peoples always have different color codes. In the world of a European culture, the color of authority has always been purple. In China, yellow. We think the color of death is black, in India it is white. The Egyptians had another color of life, green. That's why the god Osiris, who according to their beliefs had risen to life after he had been killed, was standardly painted green. That was the symbol of resurrection. It's clear why green, because the living nature is green. Why? That's so simple. You just needed to acquire that as a child, that those who weren't real colors, that they symbolically stood for something else. All the Christian iconography is based on such symbolism of color. It has codes for red color, the blue color, the golden color, and they are all placed on icons in proper combinations. All who know that language read off what that really means and what is encoded in the given picture. One of the most recognizable images in the Russian culture is an old lady with a scythe. If you aren't familiar with it, you are most likely to miss the idea, because for you, this lady isn't associated with anything but farming. I personally asked people from Germany, Turkey, Iraq and Korea if this picture reminded them of anything apart from agriculture. No, they said. Actually, for Russians, this is a hint at death, but a playful one. The real representation of death is a decrepit hag with a scythe. Yet, most Russian people get the hint in the picture I showed you. In the Northern European culture, the same role is given to a knight with a sword and the face of a skull. Why? Often it is all conditioned by the language. In the Russian language, the word for death, smерть, is feminine. In the German language, der Tod is masculine. That's why for Germans, it makes more sense to picture death as a knight, not as a decrepit hag. Well, if it's a knight, then he naturally may carry a sword, not a scythe. In one of our prior talks, I mentioned such symbols from the Russian culture as the green serpent and a little squirrel. The serpent stands for alcohol and addiction to it, the squirrel for delirium tremens. Now, for the Chinese, a great symbolic role is played by a dragon, which stands for all good things, including wisdom and supreme authority. Without knowing these details, we may not grasp the real meaning of symbols mentioned. We may not even realize that the words are used as allusions to the ideas those symbols stand for. A literal translation won't give you a prompt. You just need to know that code, and it gets acquired along with the whole culture.